What a turnout. What a turnout. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special opportunity here at the University of the Ryukyus. My name is Takaaki Yasuka. I'm the coordinator of today's event. At the top, I'd like to acknowledge that this illuminating event is co-hosted by SELT-Okinawa and JOTO-Okinawa in conjunction with the COC project of the University of the Ryukyus. On behalf of all the people involved, I'm thankful for their great generosity and tremendous support. Without them, Professor Odalis would not have been here. You can, of course, sign up and become a member of JOTO-Okinawa and SELT-Okinawa today and participate in subsequent several events for the rest of the year as well. All right, enough for the housekeeping. To kick off today's event, Professor Yamauchi, President of SELT-Okinawa, will deliver his remarks, opening and welcome remarks. Professor Yamauchi.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today's MC, Professor Hiraseka, introduced me. I represent SELT-Okinawa, Society of English Language Teachers in Okinawa, or沖縄英語教育学会in Japanese. And on behalf of SELT-Okinawa and the Church, Okinawa chapter, and faculty of law and letters of the University of Ryukyus, I'd like to give a few words of gratitude, especially for Dr. Rod Harris. It is a great pleasure and honor for us to be able to have to invite him today to today's meeting and to welcome him as an honorable guest speaker today. We're really happy to have some time together with you. Just let me tell you something about my experience with Dr. Rogers, but he doesn't have anything to do with it. I just think about it, okay? Simply put, I've been one of the great fans of his since I got a job here at the University of Ryukyus about 6 years ago. As you already know, he has written many books and articles, and I have used his books and articles to have a better knowledge of TESOL field, especially in the field of second-hand acquisition. And talking about second-hand acquisition, I just retired this March from the University of Ryukyus, and I'm teaching now I'm working at Nagoya University of Foreign Studies, and I just flew from Nagoya today, and I came here directly from the airport, and I just checked my booklet, handbag now, and luckily I found this book was inside the bag. This is a second-hand acquisition written by Dr. Harris. I have been using this textbook for almost 6 years ago. Some of my former students use this textbook. And still at Nagoya, I use this textbook at my seminar classes. So I owe him a great deal for guiding me in this facility world of TESOL. And So today's lecture is the very one I have long wanted to attend. And I'm sure everyone here will share the same feeling and gratitude with me today. So, Dr. Lopez, welcome to Okinawa, and welcome to today's lecture. We all welcome you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yamuchi. As he underscored, it is quite an honor for us to be here tonight with the distinguished Professor Rodellis, University of Auckland, New Zealand. It is quite impossible for me to condense his the work, the career of Professor Rodellis into an introduction of reasonable length. It's going to be more than reasonable length. But in fact, the vast popularity of his work makes such an introduction unnecessary. Let me therefore take this book as just one example. Understanding Second Language Acquisition, second edition, has just been published this year. The first edition of which, as you all know, was a sensation, a phenomenon in the SLA and TESOL fields, so much so that every single language teacher that I know has a book in the bookshelf. This newly published book, without a doubt, will follow that trend as well, I'm quite certain. Now, I'd like to share my personal anecdote about Professor Rodellis in order to illustrate a glimpse of how special he is. In December 2010, I received the news that I had been accepted to a PhD program at the University of Auckland. My colleagues and senior teachers at that time were all excited for me. However, it turned out that many of them did not even know which country the university was located. They all knew, however, that Professor Rodellis was working for the university. One Japanese professor put me aside and began telling me a story. He went, "So, you're going to the University of Auckland, huh? Guess what? A few years ago, I went to a cafe in New Zealand where I could see Rod Ellis's office." I still cannot forget his proud face, Doyagao. And then I thought to myself, did you just say that you went to a cafe and had coffee where you could see Rod Ellis's office? Wait. Let me make it clear. You didn't see him, you didn't speak to him, but saw his office from far? One thing is for sure. All of you in this room today will be able to tell your colleagues and your students for the rest of your life that you have actually met Rod Ellis and listened to his seminars in person. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me and welcome distinguished Professor Rod Ellis.
Well, thank you very much for those very warming introductions. I don't think I've ever received such warm introductions anywhere. It's a great pleasure to be in Okinawa. It's my first visit, and I've always wanted to come to Okinawa, always, right? So it's a great privilege for me to be able to come here. Just give me a minute, I need to get my PowerPoint up now. you to do 2 talks. The first talk, as you can see, is called Using Tasks in Language Teaching. And in fact, one of my books that they haven't mentioned. Yeah, can you hear me clearly at the back? Or would you prefer me to use this? Is this better? Yes. It's better. All right, okay. One of my books is called Task-Based Language Teaching, and it's an aspect of language teaching that I think is very important for Japan, because my experience of Japan is that there are too many students who study English for 6 years in high school, but leave high school without really being able to communicate, without being able to speak and to communicate. And one of the reasons why is the way that you were taught, and so I've been looking at alternative ways in which high school students, university students might be taught. And one of these ways is task-based language teaching. Okay? Now, at one stage during my talk, I'm going to actually get you to do a task, right? And it's a listening task, so don't worry. You don't have to speak in English. You just have to listen, okay? But you will need a piece of paper for this. So do you have a piece of paper handy? Everybody have a piece of paper and a pen? Yeah? Okay. So in a minute, you will do the task. Here is the outline of my talk. I'm going to begin by trying to define what a task is, and then I'm going to actually illustrate the task by getting you to do it, to do one task. Then I want to talk about 2 ways in which one can use tasks in language teaching. And then I'm going to move on to talk about how teachers can try to evaluate the tasks that they use in their teaching. Because I'm quite keen to encourage teachers not only use tasks in their classroom, but also to evaluate how well they work with their students in the classroom. And then a few final comments. So first of all then, what is a task? I usually define a task in terms of a language teaching activity that satisfies 4 criteria. It has 4 key characteristics. The first is that when you do a task, you are primarily focused on understanding and producing messages. You're focusing on communicating rather than trying to actually learn language. You're focusing on trying to use what you already know in order to produce and understand messages. Some kind of gap, and in a moment you'll see what I mean. The third is that in task-based language teaching, you don't give learners the language that they will need in order to do the task. The language they need to do the task, the English they need to do the task, must come from them. They have to use their own linguistic resources. You're not going to necessarily pre-teach the language. Okay? And finally, there has to be some communicative outcome, not just simply using English correctly. There has to be some communicative purpose that you've satisfied. So let's have a look at an example of a task. This is a very simple listening task, the map task, and you can see a little outline of an island. Can you see the outline of the island? So the first thing I want you all to do, if you would, is to draw the outline of the island on your piece of paper. Draw it quite big, not too small, please. Not too small. Draw the outline. Now, let me just point out something about the outline. If you look at it very closely, you will see that it looks a little bit like a face. Can you see that? Right? So when you draw it, make it look a little bit like a face. Yeah? This is not quite the same shape as Okinawa. Okay. All right, have you drawn it? Are you ready? Right, now all I'm going to do is to tell you where 7 places are located on this map, and I want you to draw in the names of these places in the correct place on the map. Okay? Are you ready? So number 1 is Betu, and Betu is the main town on this island, a bit like Naha. Yeah? And it is situated on the nose of the island, about where the nostril is. It's on the coast, about where the nostril is, on the nose of the island. So can you please draw in Betu? Have you got it? Would you like me to repeat it? Anyone want me to repeat it? Hands up if you want me to repeat it. Ah, okay. So Betu is the main town on the island, and it's situated on the nose of the island. You can see the nose, it's quite pointed, it's got a point to it. Yeah? And it's about where the nostril is. You know, the nostril? About where the nostril of the nose is, and it's on the coast. Happy now? Yeah? Okay, Songa. Songa is a very small town, and it's situated on the other side of the island. It's under the ear of the island. If you look under the ear of the island, you will see that there is an inlet from the sea, an inlet from the sea. And at the end of that inlet, under the ear, is where Songa is situated. Please draw in Songa. Okay, happy? Got it? You want me to repeat it? I'm going to check how well you've done in a minute. So if you want me to repeat it, you have to ask me. Bottomless Bay is the bay on which Betu is situated. Okay? Mataka is a very, very small little village, really, and it's situated in the neck of the island, but it's not on the coast. It's a little bit inland, in the middle of the neck of the island. Please write in Mataka. Next, I'm going to do the Iluba Mountains. And the Iluba Mountains run across the top of the island, where the forehead of the island is. And it runs right across the island, but it doesn't quite come down to the coast on either side. So the Iluba Mountains is where the forehead of the island is. It runs across the island, but it does not come right down to the coast on either side. Next we have the river Ilonga. And the river Ilonga starts in the Iluba Mountains. It starts on the right side of the Iluba Mountains as you look at your map. And it runs down the island through Songa into the inlet on which Songa is situated. Got it? Oh, I see we have a slow learner here, all right? I'm talking about the river Ilonga, and it starts in the Iluba Mountains. On the right-hand side of the Iluba Mountains, as you look at your map, it runs down the island, through Songa, into the inlet on which Songa is situated. Got it? And then finally we have the river Ironga. And the river Ironga starts on the other side of the Iluba Mountains, and it runs down the island, through Betu into Bottomless Bay. So please draw in the River Ironga and label it and write the name of the river. Okay? You want me to repeat again?
Yeah.
All right, the River Ironga begins again in the Aluba Mountains, but on the other side, the left side of the Aluba Mountains, as you look at your map, it runs down the island, through the town of Betu, into Bottomless Bay. Got it? Okay. Right. Now I'm going to trust you to mark your own map and see how well you have done in this task, all right? So there you are. You have 1 mark for every correct place. 1 mark for every correct place. Please be very careful with the River Ironga and the River Ilonga, and make sure you've got them in the right place and with the right label, right? Sorry about the names. I know very difficult for Japanese people, Ironga, Ilonga. Yeah? So you had to listen very carefully here, right? All right, so there are 7 places here. So let's just have a quick show of hands. How many people got 7 places in the correct place on the map and also labeled correctly? Put your hand up if you got 7. Okay, he's not so slow after all right? He was just pretending, I think. Yeah. 6. Put your hand up if you got 6. 5. 4. Right, we won't go lower than that, all right? We won't go lower than that. Now, the interesting thing is this a task, right? So I go back, if I can, to my criteria and try to show you how this task matches these criteria. First of all, was your primary focus on my message, on trying to understand what I was saying? Was the primary focus on message rather than trying to learn language? You agree? Yeah. Was there some kind of gap? Yes, yes, yes. Because I knew where these places were, and you didn't. And to find out where these places were, you had to ask me, and if you didn't understand, you had to request clarification. Did you have to use your own linguistic resources? Yes, of course you did. Not to speak, but to listen. You had to listen carefully and use your own knowledge of English in order to understand what I was saying. And is there a clear communicative outcome? Yes, of course there is. That is the communicative outcome. The map with the names of the places put and in the correct position on the map. Okay? So that is an example of a task. Yeah? And what I think should happen in English lessons is that learners should be doing many more activities like this, right? Because slowly this builds up their ability to understand and later on to actually use to speak English, etc. Right? I also want very quickly, if I can, to compare a task and an exercise, right? Because what we usually give students to do is exercises. And I really want to try to argue that we need to maybe not get rid of exercises completely, but at least use more tasks and fewer exercises. So there is my definition of a task and an exercise. So you can see the 4 criteria for the task again, and then you can see what an exercise does. In an exercise, the primary focus is on using language correctly. There's no gap in an exercise. It involves what I call text manipulation. Learners are manipulating language that is given to them, filling in blanks, right? filling in blanks, putting the verb in the right tense, etc. Manipulating the language that is given to them, rather than having to use their own language. And the successful performance is on the accurate use of English, not on whether they've completed the task, not whether they've achieved the task outcome, but on whether they've used English correctly. So I'm going to illustrate the difference now between a task and an exercise. And I'm going to start with this activity, which I call going shopping. So look at it carefully. It says, look at Mary's shopping list, then look at the list of items in Abdullah's store. And you can see that there's Mary's shopping list. She wants to buy some oranges, eggs, flour, powdered milk, biscuits, jam. And then there's Abdullah's store. These are the things that he stocks in his store. This is a very small store. It's not like 7-Eleven, right? It's a very small little store. Yeah. Then it says, work with one partner. One person is Mary, and the other person is Mr. Abdullah. And then it says, make conversations like this, and it gives you a little model. Mary, good morning, do you have any? Abdullah, yes, I have some, or no, I don't have any. So in other words, the conversations might go something like, good morning, do you have any oranges? No, I don't have any. Okay? Etc. And Mary would go through her shopping list. Now, is this a task? Or is this an exercise? And I'm pausing to let you think. Is it a task? Is it an exercise? And to decide that, you would have to go once again back to my 4 criteria for a task and ask yourself, does this activity satisfy the criteria for a task? So let's just see what people think. Put your hand up if you think this is a task. Hands up if you think this is a task. Put your hands up if you think it's not a task. Right, and put your hands up if you haven't put your hand up. Okay, all right, okay. I agree, it's not a task. It doesn't satisfy the 4 criteria at all, right? Because people don't have to use their own linguistic resources, their own language. They're given a model, and all they have to do is to put the missing word into the model that they are given, right? And there's no communicative outcome. Let's now look at this activity. What can you buy? Now, we have student A who has one set of material, and student B who has another set of material, and each one is given an instruction. So student A says you're going shopping, here is your shopping list, put ticks next to the items on the list that you can buy. And student B says you own a store, here is the list of items for sale in your store, find the items that student A asks for that you do not stock and write them down, right? And of course, when people do this activity, student A would not be able to see student B's list of items, and student B would not be able to see student A's shopping list. Yeah? So there's a gap. And pretty obviously, this has now become a task. Yeah? So what is interesting is that we've got exactly the same materials. We've got exactly the same content. But the way in which the content is used here makes it an exercise. And the way in which the content is used here makes it a task. And the argument is that if they are doing the exercise, the language they use will be very stilted, will not be natural. They're not using their own language. They're not creating their own utterances. But when they do the task, their language will be more natural, and they will have to be using whatever language they have in order to try to communicate to achieve the task. So the task forces people to try to communicate, right? Whereas the exercise does not. And my main argument is that if we want students to leave school with confidence in communicating, we've got to create in the classroom opportunities for them to experience what it is like to communicate. That's my essential argument. There are different types of tasks. There are real-life tasks and pedagogic tasks. Real-life tasks are tasks that resemble the kinds of things that you have to do in real life. So you might, for example, have a task where someone is telephoning a hotel to try to make a hotel booking, right? And again, each person would have information. The person making the call would have an idea about what kind of room, dates, how much he could afford to spend, and then the hotel receptionist would have information about availability of rooms, would have information about the cost of rooms, etc., right? And so they would then have to carry out. That, I would argue, is a kind of real-life situation. Pedagogic tasks, on the other hand, are not real life. You don't really do them in real life. So what about the task that I just shown you? What can you buy? Would you say this is real life, or would you say that this is more pedagogic? Well, it has a little bit of real life to it, but I don't think it's really a real life, you know. I mean, for a start, these days we go into supermarkets and we don't even ask for things, we just take them off the shelf, right? So I don't think it's really a real life task. I think it's a pedagogic task, right? And people argue as to whether it's best to use real life tasks or whether pedagogic tasks will do the job, right? And one of the arguments that goes on in task-based language teaching is, should we use real-life tasks? Is it okay to use pedagogic tasks? Input-based tasks versus output-based tasks. I think this is a very important distinction. Input-based tasks are tasks where the students do not have to speak, where students do not have to write. They only have to listen, or they have to read, right? Output-based tasks, on the other hand, are tasks that require speaking or perhaps writing, right? And this is a very fundamental difference in tasks. So the map task, was it an input-based task or an output-based task? Clearly it was input-based. You only had to listen, you didn't have to speak, right? And you had to write the names, but you could see the names, you just copied the names, right? No real writing, no real production is involved. What about what can you buy? Output or input based? Clearly output based, right? Now imagine that you have a class of students and they're not used to task-based language teaching. What kinds of tasks would you start with, do you think? Input-based tasks or output-based tasks? You've got to start with input-based tasks because these people are not confident about speaking in English, right? Therefore, you've got to first of all build up their ability to listen and process English before you can really put them in a position where they have to speak, right? Sometimes people say that task-based language teaching doesn't work in Japanese high schools because the students are too, they're too reluctant to speak in English. Yeah? Of course, that's a mistake about task-based language teaching. Because task-based language teaching does not have to be output-based tasks. Task-based language teaching can be input-based tasks. And the input-based tasks, over time, can prepare students to do the speaking that they need to do in the output-based tasks. Unfocused versus focused tasks. An unfocused task is a task which does not have any particular predetermined, pre-planned language that you want the students to try to use. There's no attempt to design the task so that it will elicit the use of, say, a particular grammatical structure, right? Or a particular set of vocabulary. The idea is just to get them to either understand or to produce English, right? Any English. A focus task, on the other hand, is a task that is designed in such a way that it will provide students with an opportunity to use, say, some particular verb tense that you want to give them the opportunity to practice, right? And task-based language teaching can be a mixture of unfocused and focused tasks. Closed versus open tasks. A closed task is a task which really has just one answer, or maybe two possible solutions to the task. An open task, on the other hand, is where there's many possible answers to it, right? So if you look at the task that I've given you, the map task, would you say that that is a closed task or an open task? Open? Closed? They're saying closed here, you're saying open here? Huh? I would call it a closed task because there's a definite answer to it. Either you get those places in the right place on the map and you label them correctly, or you don't. So there's only one answer to the map task. It's a closed task, right? What about the other task that I showed you? What can you buy? Open or closed? Think. Open or closed? It's also a closed task because there's a definite answer, right? Mary has to find the items that she can buy and put a tick next to them. So either she finds the right items or she doesn't. There's only one answer to the task. And similarly for student B, he's got to identify the things on Mary's list that are not in his shop and write them down. It's closed, right? So both of these tasks are closed tasks. This is another thing to know about task-based language teaching, and that is that when you begin to do task-based language teaching, it's better to use closed tasks. So if you're introducing task-based language teaching into your classroom, then what you need to do is to use input-based tasks that are closed initially, right? One advantage of closed is that you can very quickly find out how well people have done the task. How many did you get right in the map task? I could ask you, and you could put your hand up, and I could see how well you have done in this task, okay? That's very useful for a teacher, to know how well the students have actually done the task. Finally, there's here and now and there and then tasks. Oh, I haven't explained open tasks. I don't have an example on my PowerPoint here. I'll describe one. One of my favorite tasks is called the heart task. Heart. All right? No, it's not about love. Okay. It's about 4 people that need a heart transplant. They desperately need a heart transplant. There's a youngish girl, there's a middle-aged mother, there's a very old guy, and there's another sort of middle-aged guy, right? And the students are given information about each of these people. For example, the old guy is a very heavy smoker, all right? A very heavy smoker, yeah? And they're given detailed information about these 4 people that need heart transplants. And then they are told, but unfortunately, there's only one heart available. So only one of these 4 people can get the heart transplant. And the idea is to put the students into groups and have them discuss each of the 4 people and decide which person should get the heart transplant. Okay? And give their reasons
They have to give their reasons. That's an open task, because the way the information is organized, it's not clear-cut who should really get a heart transplant. It's a matter of opinion, a matter of opinion. So, if I were to describe that task, it's a pedagogic task, it's an output-based task, it's an unfocused task, it's an open task, and going to the last one, it's really a there and then task. Here and now task is when you have the information in front of you, so that you can refer to it. But there and then is when you are talking about something more abstract, or something in the past, or something that you can't see, right? And that's also an important distinction, because here and now tasks are easier than there and then tasks, right? So if I go back to my tasks, what can you buy? There and then or here and now? I would say here and now, because student A has got the list in front of her, and so can refer to this list when she is doing the task, right? Similarly, student B has the list of things in his store in front of him, okay? What about the map task? The map task is also a here and now task. You've got the map in front of you, you've drawn it, right? Yeah? You can see it, etc. You can see the names of the places. So it's a here and now task. But the heart task is potentially a there and then task, right? Because you might give the students the information about each person. They have to read the information, make notes about the information about each person. You then take away the description of each person. Then they start to discuss which one should get the heart transplant. So they no longer have the information, the detailed information in front of them, etc. Okay? So what I'm really trying to show you is that these types of tasks really are quite important, because they help you to think about what kind of task is suitable for different learners. And this is what I'm trying to do on this slide here, suiting the task type to the learner. So I think for beginner learners, we probably use pedagogic tasks which are input-based, they are closed, and they should be here and now tasks. For intermediate learners, pedagogic input-based and output-based tasks, maybe some focus tasks to help them master particular difficult grammatical structures, a mixture of pedagogic and real-life tasks, a mixture of closed and open and here and now and there and then. And advanced learners, mainly output-based tasks, probably focus tasks to help them master particular language problems that they have not yet properly acquired, real-life tasks probably for advanced learners rather than pedagogic, mainly open, and of course there and then tasks. And then of course you also have special purpose learners. Special purpose learners are learners who are learning the language for a specific purpose, like you might have a group of students who have joined the Hilton hotel chain, and they are being given training in how to work in the restaurant, right? So no sense in giving them general pedagogic tasks. They need to have tasks that match the kinds of things they'll have to do in a restaurant, like giving out the menu, writing down what it is that people want to order, taking it back, dealing with complaints, etc. Yeah? Real-life tasks. So special purpose learners are probably going to only do real-life tasks. Now, because of time, I'm going to skip this. But I do want to talk a little bit about evaluating a task, okay? One of the courses that I teach at my university in Auckland, this is a master's level course, is called Task-Based Language Teaching and Learning. And what I get the students to do is to first of all design their own task. They design it in groups, right? And then they write up their task and they write a rationale for the task, why they've chosen this task for this particular group of learners, etc. And I give them feedback on their task. And then for the second assignment, they have to actually teach the task. But they not only have to teach the task to a little group of learners, they have to evaluate it. They have to decide whether the task is actually working well or not working well, right? So I'm now talking about how one can set about evaluating a task. So the key question that we have to ask is, does a task work? If you use a task with your students, does it work? And I think this really involves asking a number of different questions, whether students enjoy doing the task, and whether they found it useful, the extent to which the task results in the type of learner behavior that the teacher had in mind when selecting or designing the task. In other words, when you get students to do a task, you have an idea about how you want them to behave, what kind of language you want them to use. For example, when I did the map task, I was hoping that some people would put their hands up and say, I didn't understand, can you repeat it? I was hoping that people would request clarification. And you requested clarification, didn't you? Was it you? Who was the person here who requested clarification? Right? And then there was this slow learner here who was requesting clarification. But he was only requesting clarification because he knew that that was the kind of behavior that I wanted you to do, right? And you being Japanese people, you don't like to interrupt sensei. You don't like, even though you don't understand what I've said, you'd rather sit there pretending that you understand, rather than put your hand up and say, I didn't understand, can you say it again, right? So I was hoping that that's what you would do. And you did it a little bit, but not much. I'd have to teach you for much longer to get you to do that, okay? And finally, whether the task contributes to the student's acquisition of the L2. Do students actually learn any new language? When you did the map task, did you learn any new language? Can you think of anything that you learned that you didn't really know before? Any word, for example? Can you think back? And inlet? You didn't know inlet? Right? Maybe some people have remembered it, right? Maybe many of you will forget it. Nostril? You all knew nostril? Anyone here didn't know nostril? Maybe some of you learned nostril. You can learn new language from doing a task, right? You don't learn it by studying it, you learn it by picking it up, yeah, naturally, etc. This just tells a little bit about the different approaches for what I call a micro-evaluation of the task. The teacher evaluating how a task works. And you can see that there are three basic approaches, what I call student-based and response-based and learning-based. You can see that there are different these different approaches are getting at different aspects of students' performance of the task. So student-based is primarily concerned with motivation. Were learners motivated when they did the task? Did they like it? Did they enjoy it? Did they find it useful? Were they motivated? Did you like the map task? Did you like the map task? Did you find it interesting? Yeah? So you were a bit motivated, but not all of you. Anyone here who was not motivated, be very brave, who didn't like the map task. Hands up if you didn't like the map task. No. Okay. I don't believe you. Everybody likes the map task. Response-based Here you look at the student's performance of the task. Do the students perform the task in the manner intended? And learning-based, you're looking at development. Is there any evidence that learners have acquired? And in order to answer these questions, you would have to actually collect some data as a teacher. So when you're doing task-based evaluation, you're really doing a kind of research. The teacher's becoming a small-scale researcher. And that's something else that I'm quite keen to get teachers to do, to start thinking about how they can research their own teaching. And one way that you can do this quite effectively is by trying to evaluate a task that you want to do with the students, etc. And so there's different types of data that you can collect to try to find out whether the task has worked or not worked, okay? So I'm going to give an example of task evaluation and then come to the conclusion of my talk. This was a task evaluation carried out by one of my master level students. Her name was Sharon Whippy, okay? She had what's called a pre-task. So before they did the main task, they did a pre-task. And this was input-based, and the students were given a map and listen to directions, and they had to draw the routes on the map, and they could request clarification if they didn't understand. Similar to my map task, but this time drawing in a route, not drawing in the names of places. And then the main task, students worked in pairs. Each student had the same map, but with 6 different locations marked on it. They took turns describing the routes they took to get from one location to another, and their partners then drew in the routes on the map they described. So they worked in pairs, and one person was describing a route, and the other person had to draw it in on their map, okay? And they were given 15 minutes to complete the task, right? The students, small class, 11 intermediate level students, and this was in the English Language Academy at my university, and this is a special academy not to provide people with degree education, but to train them in English, to prepare them to enter university, etc. Right? So there were 11 intermediate level students. She had aims for her task. I always get the students to try to think, what are my aims for the task? What am I trying to do with this task? Were the students able to use their own linguistic resources to describe the routes on the map? Were the students able to deal with any communication problems that arose if they didn't understand each other? Did they deal with that, or did they just pretend they understood? Were they able to complete the task successfully? And did the students enjoy the task and find it useful for learning? So these were the questions that she wanted to find out, right? Here is her data collection. For the student-based evaluation, she had a questionnaire about different aspects of the lesson, and this was completed at the end of the lesson. So after they completed the task, then they did the questionnaire very quickly. And response-based, she audio recorded the students as they performed the task, and then she prepared transcription. She listened and prepared transcriptions of their performance of the task. And she also collected in their completed maps to see whether they had been able to draw in the routes, etc. Okay? This is the student questionnaire that she used. I think doing map direction tasks is helpful to my learning. I think working in pairs helped me to practice my spoken English, etc. So they simply had to indicate to what extent they agreed or they disagreed with these statements, right? And this then gave us some idea of the students' response to this particular task that she got them to do. This is a little bit of her transcription. She transcribed the students doing the task. And here is an example of student 1 and student 2 doing the task. So student 1, now to say this, pointing a traffic light symbol on map. So go, no, this one, I don't know. Student 1 to teacher, how to say this, traffic lights. Now the reason I've given you this example is because I've argued that when people do tasks, they can actually learn new language. What new language might they have learned from doing this task, from this exchange? Answer, traffic lights. Neither of the students knew the word traffic lights, right? But by doing the task, with the help of the teacher, who is listening in, they're given the word traffic lights, they repeat it, and perhaps they remember it and learn it, etc., right? My point is that you can learn new language when you do tasks. It's not just a question of becoming better at communicating. It's a question also of learning new language. Here's another sample interaction. Student 1 goes south along the high street. Along, student 1. Actually, she mispronounced it, I think. I think student 1 says, go south along the high street. Along, go south. Go to south. South, south. S-O-U-T-H. Oh, yeah, south. And here again, you can see that potentially someone can learn something, right? Namely, the correct pronunciation of the word south, okay? She analyzed the students' interactions, and she looked for evidence that they were able to negotiate for meaning when a communication problem arose. She also analyzed them to look for what she called pushed output. Did it push them to try to make them use English more precisely, better? And quantitative analysis of the students' responses to the questionnaire. Most of the students agreed that the task was useful and fun, so it was successful there. They all found the pre-task activity quite helpful. I haven't talked about pre-task, but it's very often a good idea to do some kind of pre-task before you get the students to do the main task. They approved of the time limit set for the task. They liked the fact they had to do it quickly, only 15 minutes. But one student, however, was negative about the task. Actually, this is no surprise. Yeah? Are you ever going to keep all the students in your class happy all the time? Probably not. Some more results. There was some confusion about how to complete the task. Some pairs did not draw in the routes on their map until the teacher reminded them. All the pairs were able to complete the task successfully. The pairs differed in time it took them to do the task and the number of turns that they produced, how much language they produced. Comprehension problems were addressed mainly through confirmation checks. Students had problems with each other's pronunciation. There was very little evidence of pushed output, of using long utterances, using more elaborate, more complex language, etc. And some students requested assistance from the teacher. So these were her conclusions as a result of doing this evaluation. It was clear that the students responded to the task in different ways. This always happens. When you get students to do an exercise, you can be pretty certain that the students will do the exercise in more or less the same way. But when students are doing tasks, there's more opportunity for students to be creative and to respond to it in their own way, right? I see this as a good thing, not as a bad thing. In general, though, the students demonstrated staying power. You know this expression? Staying power? Right, are you still listening to me? Do you have staying power? Staying power means that you haven't got out your smartphone and checking to see the messages on it, right? Yeah, staying power means you're still listening to what I have to say, right? Staying power. And she felt the students had stayed. They stayed with the task. They kept at it. They didn't give up. The task did result in interactionally authentic language use. I've shown you some examples of how they were speaking. But the task resulted in very short, simple turns. No complex turns, no long turns, right? So she saw that as a limitation of the task. And this led her to think how she might improve the task. And this is one reason why it's always useful for teachers to sometimes think about how they create the tasks that they use in their classroom. She thought that maybe some initial vocabulary input would have helped the students, such as how to pronounce the street names on the map, because they struggled with the street names. Giving more planning time might have resulted in more complex language use. Giving them time to plan how to describe the route might have resulted in more complex language. But ultimately she thought if she wanted them to use more complex language, this kind of task was the wrong task. Because when you're giving directions, telling people the route that they have to follow, typically you use very short, simple utterances, right? And if you wanted more complex language, longer terms, then she thought maybe she needed a storytelling task, etc., where students have to tell a story. This is her final comment. She said this is her comment about doing the evaluation. It's been a huge learning process undertaking an evaluation such as this as a teacher and as a researcher. Through evaluating the task, what has become apparent is the myriad of factors that influence learner language development, from task design and implementation through to psychocognitive and social cultural elements. Probably the most important point is the processes a learner goes through in acquiring an L2. And that is exactly what task-based language teaching is about. It's about creating the processes in the classroom that learners have to go through in order to not just learn a language to pass a test, but to learn a language so that you can go and chat up someone of the opposite sex. All right? So that you can communicate with people promptly, etc. And these are my final comments. That I'm not suggesting that every lesson should be a task-based lesson. I think that teaching can consist of a mixture of task-based lessons and more traditional type language teaching. Tasks help students to activate their L2 knowledge in communication. They help people to actually develop the ability to interact in English. Tasks also help students to acquire new vocabulary and even new grammar, traffic lights, the correct pronunciation of South, and they can even pick up new grammar as well through doing tasks. Using tasks in the classroom requires teachers to adopt a different role from traditional teaching. They have to become performers and assistants rather than knowers. In other words, teachers have to behave in a different way. They can't just be sensei, right? They have to be participants in the task, right? Not sensei, saying what's right, what's wrong, etc. Effective use of tasks involves ensuring that they are at an appropriate level of difficulty for the students, very important, right? And for tasks to be effective, students need to be primarily focused on meaning, on message creation, but they also need sometimes to focus on form, like we saw the students doing in Sharon Whippy's task, where they were asking the teacher, what's the word for this, traffic lights, etc. Where they were focusing on the correct pronunciation of South, etc. There's focusing on form that takes place naturally during task-based language teaching. So what I hope I've done is to encourage you to think about using tasks with your students and to perhaps have some idea about what kind of task you need to start off with. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions quickly. Then we'll take a little break and I'll go to my second talk.
Now we take a couple of questions. Anybody, any comments? Welcome.
I don't think I've ever been given so much water.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for your very interesting lecture. And I would like to ask about the 4 factors for the task-based, for the task. At the very beginning of your lecture, you said the students should utilize their own the linguistic resource.
That's it.
And I strongly agree, but in case the language learner is a very, very beginner, their resources probably quite limited.
Yeah.
In that case, how can we do to make it a task?
Well, you have to use input-based tasks. You have to use input-based tasks, and you have to do it in such a way that students can understand, right? Bitte stehen Sie. Bitte stehen Sie. Stehen Sie. Kommen Sie her. Kommen Sie her. Kommen Sie her. Ja? Danke. Setzen Sie sich. That's a very simple task, right? Kind of GPR type task, yeah? Do you know any German? You don't know any German? But you understood what I said? You understood what I said? I mean, how do children learn Japanese, very young children? You know, how did I learn English? Do you think my mum said, today we are going to learn 10 new words and the present simple tense? You think that's how I learned English? Yeah, you think that's how you learn Japanese? You know, okay, Dad says we're going to do wa and ga today. All right? Input-based tasks. I mean, I have one of my PhD students, Netsuko Shintani, was teaching 6-year-old Japanese children who knew no English at all, just like he knows no German, right? And she designed a set of activities which were input-based, involving cards, and they had to listen to instructions like find the crocodile and take the crocodile to the zoo. She'd have a big sort of picture of the zoo on the wall. They'd look at the cards. Initially, they wouldn't know what she said, and they'd have a guess, and she'd say, no, 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 no. And then eventually they'd get it right, and she said, yes, take the crocodile, put it in the zoo. All right? And so they'd pick up the card, take it to where the zoo was, and put it in a pocket bag. All right? So she designed a set of activities like that. And they learned English.
Thank you very much.
Very unfortunately, we have to stop to this.
No, it is, yeah.
Yeah, we just take a break of 5 minutes, and then we will move on to the second session in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Second session is on grammar.